All right, if the pandemic has taught us anything, it's that we should be prepared for unpredictable moments, and that means even those hard to talk about, like events like death. So how can you protect your assets and your family through wills, trusts, and healthcare proxies?
Yeah, important topics for sure. This morning we're talking with asset protection attorney and author of the book Love and Money, Margaret Carrozza. Ann, thanks for being with us. Good morning.
Thanks so much.
These are difficult conversations. We don't like to think about death and what happens after we are gone, but these are conversations we have to have, bottom line. So your book walks us through the main ones. Basically, you need to leave a plan for what happens to what you have, regardless of your wealth, when you die. What's the first things you need to tackle?
Well, I think we need to reframe the conversation. You know, it's not just about what happens after I die. So these are legal structures, legal protections that we can put in place now to protect our family members and to protect our assets. You know, I view asset protection planning as the next level in personal finance, because what does it matter if I get a 3, 4, or 5% return on my portfolio if I have a 60% chance of losing assets to a long-term illness, a 43% chance of losing assets in a divorce, not to mention garden variety liabilities. So these legal structures protect the assets.
Gotcha.
Now, I think a lot of people watching may say, hey, I don't have, you know, large amounts of money. This doesn't apply to me. This is for people that have millions of dollars in the bank. That's not true.
Well, whatever amount we happen to have, don't we want to protect it? So I would say that the argument is on the other side of that. It's more important for folks who have fewer assets to protect them.
So we hear a lot about, you know, there's been a lot of online legal sites. Do your own will, do your own this, do your own that, which can have some value. But your point ultimately is you want to make sure that's done right. And certainly we're talking about, you need to have a will, but the big thing is to have a trust, so hopefully you don't even get to the will part of it.
Well, I think the whole, you know, can we do this on our own, or do we need to hire an expensive attorney to do the whole thing? And the reality is in the middle. There are some things we can and should do on our own. A healthcare proxy, for example, that is designed to be user-friendly. You don't need a lawyer to do a healthcare proxy.
And that would just say my wife makes medical decisions in case of something and things like that.
Who can speak for me if I can't speak for myself? So I have these documents on my website. You can download them. And I think it's very interesting. This is not only for elderly people. Look at Britney Spears. She was well into her 20s when the conservatorship was imposed upon her because she did not have advance directives in place.
Wow, right, you say she could have avoided that whole thing. I mean, you know, at that point in your life, you're probably not thinking about that, but it shows the power of these documents. If you do have them filed, she could have, wow, that's wild.
I think something you brought up was interesting, which I did not know about, people putting their homes in their children's names.
So, Bianca, this is an example of people who want to keep it simple, and they are allergic to the term trust. So they say, let me just turn over the house to my kids. Right away, there are problems. If I bought the house for $50,000 in 1978 and it's now worth $450, and I give it to you, you are stuck with my cost basis, and you're going to have capital gains taxes later to pay. I will lose my property tax exemptions. If you're in a divorce, half of the value of the property goes out the window. So we want to think in terms of a trust. We create a well-designed trust, put the house into the trust, and under federal law, there is a 5-year baking or look-back period, after which the house will be off limits if we need long-term care.
And you can still do that within the trust.
Absolutely, that's how you should do it.
The clawback period, the idea being with the house, you don't, if you had to suddenly go into long-term care, you don't want all your assets to be chewed up from that. So if you do it, if you plan ahead, far ahead enough, you can avoid that through the trust and planning and things like that. What's the biggest thing that people are overlooking, or you'd really like to sell right now when you've got the audience, as far as this is what you need to do first?
So I think we need to rethink how we leave assets to our beneficiaries. So we know that a will determines who I leave my stuff to. I want the conversation to move to how are we leaving our stuff. I have 3 children. I love them equally. What if one of them, is 57 years old and he's on my couch all day watching TV? He doesn't hold a job. He hasn't saved $5 toward retirement. Do I trust that he'll be able to manage 1/3 of my estate, boom, outright? No, he'll blow it in 18 months. So maybe I want to customize it so he gets 5% a year for 20 years. That is but one of many, many different ways that we can customize the planning for our own family situations.
Yeah, that makes sense, right? Just because some things like this will happen after your death doesn't mean you don't have a say in how they play out, and the more proactive, the better.
And then would love for you to just break down will versus trust, because we were talking about this, this whole conversation. Some people are like, I don't even know what the difference is between either of the two.
Yeah, so it's better to have a will than have nothing, right? Prince had nothing, and
it's a disaster.
Yes.
I know, it's crazy.
Aretha Franklin had a will, but it was a DIY will, which is still in court nearly 3 years later. So the will determines who gets my stuff, but it must go to probate. That means a court has to examine the actual document, determine its validity. It's a public process. People can contest a will.
That's where the layabout son could get involved, and then everyone's fighting with each other with lawyers. And that's where you can avoid the trust.
Is private. We can customize it, and it can really protect the family from any complexity, read dysfunction.
Yeah, which can definitely pop up for sure. Indeed. All right, Margaret Carrozza, that's interesting stuff.
And where can people find you if they want to connect with you?
myelderlawaddattorney.com. Free documents.
That's great.
Yeah, that's great.
What a great thing that you offer that. Thanks so much for joining us.